Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but I think it is still fair today to say that this brewery is best known for their different kinds of IPAs. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know these guys can do very well. It's also a sub-style that I very much enjoy. So I have to say I'm quite curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us because it's one of their latest releases and we haven't had one of this sub-style from them in quite a while. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful OO Brewing. So this particular beer is called the Douglas Double IPA. It comes in at 8.2% ABV and they're describing this one as a West Coast Double IPA. So if you've watched the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I love old school West Coast IPAs. I actually can't remember what the last West Coast IPA we had from OO Brewing was, but back in the day, one of my favourite beers from these guys was the Muscles Double IPA. So if this one is anything like that, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. But yeah, I think we have been missing some West Coast things. It's all been about the haze craze these days. But yeah, it should be quite nice. The other thing that stuck out to me about this beer was the fact that it's called Douglas. My little boy is called Douglas. He's named after the Black Douglas, one of the most famous Scottish warriors. But I think OO Brewing are naming this one after the Douglas fir, the tree, because you can see those in the background there. It's one of the tallest trees in the world, or one of the tallest species of trees in the world, if memory serves me correctly. But yeah, this should be quite nice. So let's crack on with it and see what we get. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from OO Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give the channel is hugely appreciated. You'll also find all the usual social media down there, as I said, and you can check out the playlists of beers from different countries. You will find this one, of course, in the Swedish playlist, and we will continue to add to those as time goes on. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at the brewery notes before we taste the beer. So, OO Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2011 by Olaf and Ole Andersson, who are childhood friends. But for many years, these guys were also avid home brewers, and they just got deeper and deeper into this hobby as time went on. So the pair just really had always been interested in beers. Ole apparently has been heavily involved in the Gothenburg beer scene since pre-drinking age, and he was the original head brewer at Stigbergets Brewery, and this is where the original OO beers were produced. So Ole was actually the developer of the GBG Beer Week beer for 2016, and also the Amazing Haze, which were both Stigbergets beers, and they, along with Narangi, released under the OO name. Those three beers were the ones that really propelled the New England IPA to stardom, if you like, within the Swedish beer scene. But while Ole is doing the brewing side of things, Olaf manages the business side of the brewery, and he was for a good period of time working in Copenhagen, but I believe he has relocated up to Gothenburg more recently, and he is based there full time. But these guys say they just like to make beers that they would want to drink themselves. But in April of 2017, Ole took the decision to leave Stigbergets and he invested his time fully in OO Brewing, with the company investing in their own facility in Hisingen near the Tingstedt Bridge in the city. This is equipped with a 2,000 litre brewing system, and it means they can brew up to 500,000 litres of beer per year. In the first year, they brewed around 100,000 litres, and they have just been working up to capacity, trying to expand up to capacity over the last little while. In 2020, they apparently brewed around 300,000 litres, and I think that they are planning to expand that further. Of course, it did take a little bit of a hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. They've also taken over the premises of Bang Restaurant recently, which is their new tap room, and this opened up in the summer of 2021. So this is somewhere that I need to go and visit the next time I find myself up in Gothenburg, which hopefully won't be too far in the future. But they've continued to expand, as I say, develop new beers and so on, and as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 105 different kinds of beer. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about OO Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can check out their social media, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer Untappd Beer Advocate pages to learn more about the different beers that they've done, or you can have a look at some of the reviews that I've done of their beers previously. But like I said, these guys are very, very well known for their New England Hazy IPAs. Some of the beers that you really need to try from them, I would say, would be, of course, the Narangi New England IPA, the Muscles or the Evergreen, which are their older West Coast IPAs if you can get them. Pivot Pills is also very good. And then if you can get the Long Boil Barley Wine or the Arctos Imperial Stout, that kind of gives you a full spectrum of what OO Brewing can do. These guys are they're a very good all-rounded brewery in my experience, but of course they really made their name with the kind of New England Hazies and the Narangi and so on, and they really have done a lot of different things. You know, you've got the 50/50 series, which are their double hopped New England IPAs, the 100 series, which is the single hop, and you've also got the Ecor series, which chooses one hop and then uses all the different hop preparation methods. It has the same hop but prepared in lots of different ways. Those are quite interesting as well. But yeah, definitely one of the Swedish breweries I would recommend that you check out. They are one of the kind of big boys of the Swedish craft beer scene, if we can call them that. So yeah, have a go at some of their beers basically. But yeah, that's all I can tell you about OO Brewing for the moment. So let's get on and actually have a taste of the beer itself. So yeah, like I said to you earlier, this one is an 8.2% West Coast double IPA. I'll just like to have a little look at the artwork again before we go on and open this beer up. This one is a 330 milliliter can, which is a little bit unusual for OO Brewing. But as you can see, there is the OO Brewing symbol. Of course, OO is just Olaf and Ole, the two founders. But yeah, I forget exactly what this beer cost when I bought it, but this was one of the ones that was released as part of the Low Carb Småskarig assortment through Systembolaget, and I think I can't remember if it was July or August, but like I say, I've been having computer problems and haven't been able to film sit-down reviews as regularly as I would have liked. But yeah, 8.2% West Coast Double IPA. Without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. So, there we go. Get this guy out and into the glass. I think I'll need to keep the can for this one as well, since it has my little boy's name on it. We'll need to do that. So yeah, there we go. There we are. So yes, anyway, as you can see, and as you would expect from a West Coast IPA, this one's poured with a lovely kind of light to medium amber colour to it. So before the head disappears, you can see that this beer is poured with about little bit over a half finger of a frothy, I would say, cream coloured head. That is just going to fade away to be a little bit more of a kind of foamy layer over the next little while, but you can see there's a mix of kind of bigger and medium sized bubbles in there too. But as you can see, the colour of the beer is absolutely lovely. So remember that when it comes to the colour of your beer, the type of malts that you use goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. The length of your wort boil can also affect it as well, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too, but when it comes to IPAs of any kind, you don't normally have to care about that, unless it's a fruit IPA, of course. But yeah, it looks pretty damn nice. The other thing to remember about West Coast IPAs is that they tend to use, for the most part, they tend to only use barley malt, whereas New England's use oats and wheat as well. It's not unheard of to use a little bit of oat or a little bit of wheat in a West Coast IPA. Like I think Ballast Point Sculpin has a little bit of wheat in it, if I remember correctly. You know, there are examples of that, but for the most part, West Coast IPAs are only barley malt. And that is the reason why these beers have more of a kind of natural haze to them, rather than the big soupy gloopy thing that you'll get from New England's. But yeah, this one is pretty clear. You can only see a little bit of condensation on the glass, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, overall, it looks pretty much as you would expect from the style. So I think we should take a little look at the aroma now and just and see what we have. Alright guys, welcome back. Apologies for the edit in this video once again. My phone was doing an update when I was filming this one, so I guess that just kind of knocked it off a little bit, and that's why the camera went a little bit funny. Need to remember to put it on flight mode next time. But anyway, we were just about to get started on the aroma of this one then, so let's do it. Oh yeah, this is pretty nice actually. You can smell straight away with this one that it's a lovely big boozy beast actually, and at 8.2% it is going to pack a good bit of punch to it. But yeah, what I will say about it as well though is that the hoppy aroma on this one's actually quite not quite as punchy as I might have expected. But then again, I do have to remember with this beer that I've been sitting on this for a month or two actually, so it won't be in its absolute freshest condition. We do need to keep that in mind. But yeah, you can still smell that big deep green component to it. It's got some lovely big oily fruits, which I will point out do smell quite familiar, so we can play a little bit of guess the hop with this one I guess. But you've also got that big kind of boozy sweet caramelly note which you would expect from the West Coast IPA. So yeah, as I said earlier, the thing that defines a West Coast IPA for the most part is that these beers tend to only use barley malt rather than oats and wheat, as you'll see in the New England IPAs these days. But yeah, this is most definitely old school West Coast IPA. I'm curious to see what the bitterness in this one is like, because that's another thing about more modern West Coast IPAs. The bitterness in many of these has been toned down a little bit because many newer craft beer drinkers have gotten into IPAs on the back of the New Englands, which only have about 30 to 40 IBUs, whereas the old West Coast ones back in the day had 80, 90 IBUs. So yeah, I'm curious about that with this one, but we'll break the aroma down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So yeah, absolutely. This one, as I've said as well with West Coast IPAs, there are two different directions you can go in my opinion. Either you can go to the more bready and biscuity West Coast IPA, such as Pliny the Elder, or you can go to the more big oily and caramelly ones, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. That would be the main example that I can think of in that regard. But for me, this one, aroma-wise, it's leaning more toward that Sierra Nevada Torpedo sort of thing. And most of the ones I've had recently have been more biscuity and bready beers. So we'll see what this one has. But aroma-wise, certainly you get a little touch of bread crust forming the backbone of the beer. There's a good little bit of kind of wholemeal brown bread in there. But the bready side of this one is a more kind of bright, fresh white bread, but there's a lot of sweet caramel for me as well. You get a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit in there, but yeah, the brown sugary notes for me are leaning toward that more caramelly sort of thing, rather than a more biscuity note. I have had double IPAs from on the West Coast side of things at this strength that have been more biscuity and bready, and of course I think I'm pretty sure the Pliny the Elder is about 8%, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one is pretty awesome in that sense. Yeah, big sweet caramel, good little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, lovely little bit of white bread in there, bit of brown bread underneath, and a wee bit of bread crust. So yeah, it goes together really, really nicely. Yeah, aroma-wise, it's pretty solid on the malty side of things. I don't think we need to say any more about it than that. On the green component, it's giving you this lovely kind of quite deep floral note for me. I don't find this one overly pine resinous, and I don't find it overly spicy. It is just like a nice deep floral aromatic character you're getting out of it. There is a little touch of earthiness in there, and there is a wee bit of grassiness as well, but I don't find this one overly I don't find it overly leaning any one way. I think it's more a deep floral aromatic note that you get out of this one. And again, remember, with West Coast IPAs, one of the big distinguishing features of this style is that they tend to rely on early addition hops for their bitterness. You've got 3 types of hoppings. Early edition hops within the first hour of the wort boil, they give you pretty much all bitterness and the big spicy green notes. Late edition hops within the last half hour of the wort boil, little touch of bitterness but mainly flavour and aroma. And then you've got dry hopping, which is pretty much all about the flavour and aroma. So yeah, New England IPAs tend to rely on late edition and dry hopping, whereas West Coast IPAs tend to have all 3, if you like, and they tend to have quite a lot of early edition hops. New England's can have a little bit, but nowhere near as much as West Coasters did. But back in the day, as we say, we'll figure out with this one when we actually try it. But the green component for me, nice and oily overall, deep floral aromatic notes, and a little bit of a grassy, sort of zesty thing to it with a little touch of earthiness. So yeah, aroma-wise, this is quite nice on that front. When it comes to the fruity side of the beer, this one's quite interesting. There is something kind of familiar about this. I do wonder if it's got a little bit of Cascade in it, because it has a wee bit of that kind of sort of figgy, sultana type note from that I always associate with Cascade. I've got quite a good nose for Cascade because one of my local beers back in Scotland, the Schiehallion Pilsner beer from Harveston Brewery, that had Cascade, so I've got a whip quick nose for that. So I suspect there's a wee bit of Cascade in this one. But on top of that, I suspect this one is something familiar, like a little bit of Citra or Simcoe and a bit of Mosaic. You've got a kind of more tropical leaning hop in this one and something a wee bit more orangey. So it could be Mosaic or Amarillo and Citra and Simcoe. I think this is something like that that's in here. And there might be one of the bittering hops, like a little bit of Chinook or a bit of Columbus in this one. But there's something quite familiar about the hop profile in this beer. And remember, hops behave differently between New England IPAs and West Coast IPAs, or even black IPAs. They depend a lot on what yeast you mix them with or what malt base you put them in. So yeah, aroma-wise, this is pretty damn nice. Yeah, I like it. The fruity side of this beer is quite big and oily. There is a little bit of that more pungent passion fruit. Like I said, underneath there's a wee bit of a kind of sultana, figgy sort of thing, which I suspect is Cascade. I'm getting a little bit of an oily mango as well, which I do like. And then there's also a little bit of there is also a little bit of a kind of drier apricot-y note to this one. But yeah, for me, there's quite a wee bit of orange in there, but it smells like a lighter orange. It's not quite as zesty as you might expect from Amarillo. So I want to say Mosaic. I've got a feeling this could be like a Simcoe and Mosaic or a Citra and Mosaic beer with a bit of Cascade in it. But yeah, good little bit of a kind of bright tangerine orange, maybe a little touch of lime, which does make me wonder about Citra rather than Simcoe. But yeah, bit of passion fruit, bit of mango, bit of a kind of brighter tangerine orange, and then a kind of figgy sultana note underneath. Maybe a little tiny touch of pineapple as well. But on this fruity side of things anyway, it's definitely quite oily, which I do quite enjoy. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the aroma. So as I always say, take a bit of time to get stuck into that. I think we should taste this beer now and see how we go. So yeah, this one is the Douglas Double IPA at 8.2% ABV from OO Brewing in Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast. Slange, skål, and cheers. Yeah. That's pretty solid actually. It's one of these ones, the first impression I have of this is that it is just a big oily, fruity kind of thing, but it certainly takes a little bit of time to build its momentum, but you can feel the bigger green component pushing its way out of this one. You can feel the slightly boozier backbone to it, and you can also feel the nice kind of more oily fruits in there as well. So this is a beer I think that takes a little bit of time to show its hand and show what it's all about. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But I do like this. It's actually a very, very juicy West Coast IPA as well. You've got that big oily note to it, both from the malt, but at the same time, the fruity side of the beer is giving you a slightly more juicy and oily type vibe. But like I say, the green component pushes its way out a little bit later on, and yeah, I think that goes together very well. So it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, a bit more spiciness coming out of it too, which I like. But let's break this down then and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So, Middle third of the palate then. Backbone of the beer, you've definitely got a little bit of a kind of more fresh bread crusty sort of thing there, but not too much. It does get a little bit more grainy the further back on the palate you go, but we'll come to that in a little while. So yeah, a little bit of fresh bread crust there, some nice kind of brown bready notes just sitting on top of that. Then you have got a good little bit of white bread. As I was saying earlier, for me this beer really leans toward a more oily and caramelly, to the more oily and caramelly end of the West Coast spectrum. So it is a little bit more like one of the Sierra Nevada type West Coast IPAs in that sense. So yeah, on top of the kind of brown bready layer, you have got a good little bit of a dense white bready character, and then on top of that, you've got the circle where all the brown sugary notes come out. So yeah. So yeah, in the dead centre of your palate, you've got that more oily, boozy, caramelly note coming out of it, which I do like. And as you move a little bit further out from that, you can feel the caramel sort of, it's actually quite dense and almost slightly caramelized in the middle of the palate. But then, yeah, as you move out toward the edges of the, if you move out a little bit further than that, it starts to sweeten up, and then you get a little bit of a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of note toward the extremities of that middle third of the palate. But yeah, bread crust, brown bread, thick, a more dense layer of white bread. Then you've got the big oily caramel and biscuity notes coming out of this one. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So a thumbs up from me for sure. Yeah. I think underneath this one you do get one or two little hints of woody character toward the front of that middle third of the palate. And that works. That does work out quite nicely. But other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the middle third of the palate. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up there on that region once again. But then the base of that back third of your palate is a little bit more kind of bread crusty, and you get a bit more graininess out of that. On top of that, you've got the brown bread layer, which is a bit more that is a little bit more kind of grainy on the back third of your palate. It's also a little bit taller as well. On top of that, you get some of the white bread, which is interesting, and then on top of all of that, you get that more airy sort of white bready kind of like you do get a lot of that more kind of white bready ester, kind of farmhousey type thing coming out of the beer, which is again, it's really quite interesting in this case. Yeah, I do like how all that goes together in this one. The way that the yeasty character comes out of this beer at the back of the palate is quite interesting, but for sure on that back third of the palate you can feel the flavour is certainly taller. Then as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit and squashes all together, which I do quite like. So you've got a really nice kind of more caramelly West Coast malt base in this one. I think that covers everything we need to say about this beer. But you certainly get a wee bit of dryness out of the yeasty part of this beer for sure. So let's look at the hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there, but it's not too prominent. As you come further forward though, you get quite a deep, and the more that I drink of this beer, the more the floral component of the beer has actually become quite spicy. So that makes me wonder if there's a good little bit of Columbus been added in this one as a bittering hop. There's just something distinctive about the spiciness here, and from experience it tells me that it might be Columbus. But as you reach the front corners of the palate, you've got quite a bright floral aromaticity to the beer, and I do think that works quite interestingly in this one. But round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of a lighter, more grassy sort of thing, and yeah, the grassy component of this beer is actually quite oily. There is a little bit of zest to it, but yeah, quite oily for me rather than anything else. But yeah, this is the thing that I'm finding with quite a few of the West Coast IPAs I'm trying in recent times. It takes a bit of time for the green component to come out, so bear with them. If you're a fan of the old school West Coast IPAs like me, don't judge them too quickly. That would be my advice. But let's focus on the front third of the palate and the more kind of oily, sweet, fruity side of the beer, should we say. So yeah. So yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, and it's a bit of a mix between a kind of brown bread and white bread in there, but the base of the front third of your palate is more a kind of sweeter white bread, and on top of that you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. Oddly enough, in that front third of the palate, I'm actually getting a little bit of a butterscotchy, butter candy type thing as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, like the base of the fruity part of this beer for me is kind of it is like Cascade, you know, you've got a little bit of that figgy sort of thing, but you've also got the kind of sultana, you know, dry white green grapey thing that Cascade can give you. So I would not be surprised if this beer does have a little bit of Cascade in it. But on top of that layer, at the back of the front third of the palate, I think there's a little bit of a stronger grapefruity, passion fruit sort of thing, which could indicate a little bit of Chinook being used as a bittering hop in this one. But could also be an indication of Citra. I'd be curious to know what the hop bill on this beer is, because it does seem very old school and familiar. This might be a kind of sea hop IPA, you know, Cascade, Chinook, Centennial, Citra. It might be something like that, I suspect, with this one. It could well be. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, a little bit of a stronger grapefruit, maybe a little bit of passion fruit in there as well. As you move further forward, it gives you a wee touch of a kind of oily, mango-y note. In the dead centre of that front third of your palate, it's got a little bit of a kind of juicy pineapple sort of thing. But yeah, maybe toward the front of that front third of your palate, it's got a little bit of a more, there's a wee hint of orange to it, but to me it actually starts to lean towards a more lemony things, and this is a more lemony flavour, and this is one of the areas where this beer departs from what you would suspect it's going to taste like based on the aroma. I was getting a good wee bit of orange out of this one, and I am getting a wee bit of a lighter sort of tangerine orange a la mosaic, but at the same time, just the way the flavour of this is going together is making me wonder, is this a sea hop IPA? And it does give you a good little bit of a lemon limey note right on the tip of the tongue, which could be Citra, right enough, but it could also be, Equinaut, or it could be a bit of Centennial, something like that. So yeah, there's a good bit of food for thought with this particular beer, but regardless, it comes across really nice. But front third of the palate, the front half of that front third of the palate, regardless, is a little bit, it's got a little bit of orangey character to it, but there is quite a wee bit of a limey, lemony kind of zest to it as well. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, as an old school West Coast IPA, I think this one is quite nice. It takes a little bit of time to show its hand, but I think it's quite solidly done. When I had a look at it on Untappd earlier, it only had the rating of like 3.7, but I think this one, it deserves a bit more than that. For being true to the West Coast IPA style, I think this one deserves a bit of a higher rating than that. But you know, everyone these days is about the kind of big fruity juicy sours or the New England hazies. The West Coast IPAs have kind of fallen behind a little bit in terms of what people want, so it kind of makes sense, to be honest with you. But as I always say, take rate beer and Untappd ratings with a bit of a pinch of salt. For me, this is a solid old school sea hop. I suspect it's a sea hop West Coast double IPA. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour profile. Let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, top end and mid body for me, smooth carbonation, nice big sort of oily mouthfeel to it. Yeah, but still quite clean, you know, typical Swedish Nordic cleanliness, could we say. In terms of IBUs, I think this one's about 70, maybe 80 IBUs. It is pushing that end, but it takes a bit of time to show that. The malt base, as we said, has a little bit of greeniness and dryness to it, but a good little bit of an oily sweetness. And you've also got that nice big oily fruity character to this one, but a solid beer, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. So that was the Douglas Double IPA coming in at 8.2% ABV, a West Coast Double IPA from OO Brewing in Gothenburg. So yeah, quite happy with this. As always, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from OO Brewing. Do give me some West Coast Double IPA recommendations as well. Check out this one, check out OO Brewing as well. And yeah, check out my social media, check out theirs, and keep up to date with all the latest goings on. But once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and enjoy the rest of the reviews.